Таны төлөө эх орон чинь юу хийж чадах вэ гэж асуухаас өмнө та өөрөө эх орныхон төлөө юу хийж чадах вэ гэж асуу. Young Federal. Сайн байцгаана хүнд үзэгчдээ. Манай өнөөдрийн дефакто нэвтрүүлгээр ИЗИНИС компанид ажилладаг худалдаа маркетинг хариуцдаг захирал Спиро Делижианнис гэж хүн оролцож байна. Thank you very much for coming to our show.
Well, thank you for having me.
We'd like to discuss about airline business in this country. And since you have been working quite for some time here, it's very interesting to hear from you. But before that, I would like to ask you a bit about why you have decided to work in airline business.
I started out on the airline business, ironically, not because I like flying. My education was always in mathematics. I wanted to become a mathematician. Mm-hmm. And the airline business is one that caters itself to optimizing, whether it be flights, crews. People complain about lost baggage and food, but in terms of trying to organize that, logistically, as a mathematician, it's a very intriguing problem. So because of my education being in engineering and as well as an MBA student, all my case studies were in the airline industry. So to me, it's something as a mathematical, intellectual pursuit. It's something that you can never find the optimal solution. You can always improve in terms of better schedules for passengers, better timings, better connections. It's a very stimulating and rewarding profession.
You have been graduating from University of Illinois near Chicago and doing your master's there.
Yes, I'm originally from Chicago. My education is in engineering. As an undergraduate, it was applied mathematics. And as a graduate student, it was in my undergraduate, it was more or less theoretical mathematics. And then as a graduate student, it became more applied mathematics. And I was doing all the engineering at the same time, because part of me wanted to figure out how a plane could fly. As a child, I was always fascinated how something that big could get up in the air and fly.
Did you figure it out?
Actually, I did it. As an undergraduate, we took all the courses, and I actually understand the physics behind it. But in terms of how I progressed into the airline industry was more so, as I said before, as an intellectual stimulating challenge.
And you have joined United Airlines?
Yes.
Quite for some time.
I worked for United Airlines for 12 years, 4 of them back in Chicago, working in revenue management. That's the department that sets the fares and the number of seats at each fare level. And then for 8 years in Hong Kong in various roles.
Is United Airlines is now the largest one in the world?
Yes, ironically, when I used to work for United 10 years ago, when I first came out to Asia, it was the world's largest airline, and now with the merger with Continental Airlines, it is again the world's largest airline.
Is it almost like that time, remember, Pan Am?
The airlines today are much, much larger than the old days of what Pan Am was and what TWA was.
Yes.
Just because there's so many more airports, so many different airplane types, larger airplane types, and generally, Jargal's hiking, just a lot more people flying.
On the other hand, this competition is so severe that they have to make altogether either alliance or get merged, no?
Yeah, the competition is, the market is now so fragmented in so many different ways in terms of you have the high-end flyers who want first in business class and all the luxury items that come with that in terms of lounge access, their frequent flyer points, things of that nature. Then you have passengers at the end of the spectrum who are just looking for the lowest fare, the cheapest fare. So there's a lot more competition, a lot more different types of passengers flying. Because in the old days, it was really very, very expensive to fly. And part of what you just said now with the alliances have come about from a two-pronged approach. Partly it's because of competition, but also because of government regulations. The airline industry tends to be one of the most overly regulated industries on a worldwide basis. And because most countries have ownership stipulations and requirements, there's limited access that some carriers can get outside of their home market. So to compensate for their ability to merge and to buy a carrier from another market that's outside of their home country, that's how alliances have formed.
What is that open skies policy that changed the industry completely? What is that about?
So as an example of how the airline industry is really over-regulated, currently many of the bilateral agreements between countries A and B are regulated by a conference that was held in Chicago in 1949. Okay.
That long ago.
Over 60 years.
60 years.
60 years ago. And it made sense in post-World War II, especially amongst Western Europe, the United States, North America, Canada, amongst the Western countries. However, the world's changed dramatically in the last 60 years. And now there's more of a trend going towards open skies, whereas open skies, instead of the current situation with bilateral treaties where a carrier from country A can fly to country B with so many frequencies a week, so many seats a week, etc. Open skies allow carriers from both countries to fly to each other's markets without any stipulations in terms of how many times a week you fly, how many seats, things of that nature.
I'm a passenger of premier class of United Airlines, this mileage terms. Who had invented this idea of mileage?
So the loyalty programs, which now are very common, not only amongst airlines, but if you think about a lot of other industries, you can go to restaurants, you can go to your favorite shops and be a member of them and have their own loyalty. The loyalty programs actually started in the 80s at American Airlines. The CEO's name at the time was Bob Crandall.
At that time it was largest airlines.
That's a good question. The 80s, I can't, because again, it all depends what you mean by largest. Some definitions are the most passengers, some are the most number of planes, some are the most passenger miles flown.
Who is that number in terms of planes today?
In terms of, well, that's a very good question. I couldn't tell you.
Korean Air?
I don't think it's Korean. It's probably still one of the U.S. carriers, only because they have so many more domestic flights.
Okay.
To give you an example, when I was in Hong Kong, the one interesting statistic is as large as Cathay Pacific is, which is a very, very large carrier in and of itself, the number of flights that Cathay Pacific has in one day is still not equivalent to the number of flights that United Airlines used to have in, the number of flights that Cathay has in 1 week is not equivalent to the number of flights that United Airlines had in 1 day.
1 day.
So the Asian carriers, as large as they tend to be in this part of the world, and they do have the larger aircraft, be it the 747s or the A340s, and a lot of them are now getting the larger A380s. In terms of the overall number of planes and the overall number of passengers they fly, they're still not part of the world's largest. They tend to be the American carriers.
Yet United Airlines was almost on the verge of a bankruptcy a few years ago.
Yeah, which was due to several factors.
Yes. September 11, decrease of market.
Right. Part of it was because of 9/11 and everything that happened. There were 4 aircraft involved in 9/11. 2 of them were from United and 2 of them were from American. Part of the other things that happened with United in terms of the management and the relationships that it had with the unions, it was always a very tense relationship. And when worse came, after 9/11 happened and then SARS and things like the tsunami, those things kind of heightened in terms of the tension between management and the unions. And that was eventually kind of like the downfall of United in terms of it going to a Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection process. But it's since come out of it.
Before we go to Mongolian aspect of our question, United Airlines is flying over Mongolia, right, to Chicago?
Yes, many of the polar routes, be it from Chicago to Hong Kong, Chicago to Beijing, the overfly rights, yes, it's much
over
faster.
Territory of Mongolia it goes as well.
Yes, especially from Chicago to Hong Kong. It flies the polar route. It goes straight north through Canada, more or less over the North Pole, down through Siberia, through Mongolia, down to Hong Kong.
And that understand over Pacific or polar. Over polar one is certain in terms of time, shorter.
Yes, it's ironically, sometimes it is shorter, sometimes it isn't, but what it really saves is on fuel. If a plane comes from North America heading to Asia, it's flying directly into the headwinds.
I see.
So when it flies directly into the headwinds, it burns up a lot more fuel, and the planes are unable to take as many passengers. By flying the polar route, you avoid all the headwinds. So with the same amount of fuel, the airplane is able to carry a lot more passengers, a lot more cargo, as well as hand luggage and personal baggage.
Okay, with this talking, there was an idea before, I think it still is, Mongolia could be a good hub for transport, air transport between Asia and North America. If we, say, do have facilities better than other countries, and we have a less regulation and a faster movement, faster service, is it realistic?
Yes and no. Part of what you need for a hub is just a large population base, and specifically a large amount of business traffic. Now, Mongolia has neither one at this point. With 2.7 million people, and the business traffic, even though it will grow in the years to come, it's not going to create that critical mass that's required. So that's the part that's no in terms of Mongolia becoming a hub in that sense, in the traditional sense of hub. However, because of its geography, as we were just talking about before, in terms of how far north it is, and the need for North American carriers as well as Asian carriers to use the polar routes, especially even Singapore Airlines and Thai, when they fly from New York. You know, Singapore Airlines flies from JFK to Singapore. Again, that's another polar route. The plane comes directly over Mongolia. The geography of Mongolia uniquely allows it to, I think there's definitely a potential here to develop a cargo logistics hub that would facilitate the transportation of cargo to and from Southeast Asia, even back over to Europe, from Siberia down to China, as well as from North America, and then eventually down into the secondary cities of China. So something like a cargo logistics hub, I think that is definitely a possibility here for Mongolia.
Is it anything that an airline is aiming at here in Mongolia?
I don't think here, I can't say what the plans are of all airlines. I know what ИЗИНИS would like to do, but in terms of foreign carriers, I think Mongolia is a destination now that's just only coming to the forefront.
Okay.
I think it's there in the minds of probably Korean and ASEAN and Jargal and on the pond, and then Chinese carriers as well too. But carriers that are not from the surrounding countries, I think they're only beginning to be aware of what Mongolia is like. It's really going to necessitate something like Federal Express, UPS, these cargo type carriers, kind of building the infrastructure here. And it's also going to, it's in one sense too, on the commercial side, you know, you're going to need the carriers looking at Mongolia, but yet on the political side, on the government side, the government would need to take a proactive measure here in terms of, for instance, with the new airport that will be built here in the next couple of years, building a facility that will facilitate cargo logistics transportation hub.
So it's still to go a lot to have these facilities.
Yeah, I think the facilities would need to be here first before the carriers would come.
Anyway, we'll go again to that. Before that, what are you doing here in Mongolia?
So I've been here now with ИЗИНИS for 2 years. I came in 2008. I first came to Mongolia in 2003, 4, and 5 when I was working for United Airlines. One of the sales roles that I had after 9/11 was going to all the countries in Asia Pacific that United did not have an office to, and opening up an office there. So I opened up the office in Vietnam, in Nepal, as well as Mongolia. And to give you an example, you might say, well, you know, United Airlines doesn't fly to Mongolia. Why do they need an office here? The best example that I can give you is that somebody from Ulaanbaatar, let's say, for instance, flies Korean to Incheon and then over to San Francisco.
Yes.
However, once they get to San Francisco, they may want to go to Las Vegas. They may want to go somewhere to Orlando, to Disney World. They need to fly a U.S. domestic airline.
Yes.
So United would have an office here in terms of facilitating that and selling those tickets for domestic travel. Or likewise, you know, if somebody, let's say, were to fly Miat to Beijing, and then from Beijing fly United Airlines back to San Francisco or Chicago or anywhere else. So the office was set up here in 2005. It came several times, as I said, 2003 and 4 and 5. Set up the United Airlines office to facilitate United Airlines selling its ticket stock here in the country. And from then, I got to know the country, I got to know the people, I got to know how business was done here, because Mongolia was my responsibility for 3+ years. And then when I had the opportunity to come here in 2008, with everything going on in the country in general in terms of the economic growth, I thought it was a great chance.
Is United Air office still here?
Yes, the United Airlines representative office is AirTrans. That's
Okay.
Air Trans is a representative for United Airlines still here, so that relationship still continues to this day.
Okay, with the ИЗИНИS being one of only two commercial passenger airlines, right, in the country, private, including me at 3, right? How do you see the situation today of your business?
Well, on the good side, our business is growing, partly because the country is growing as a whole. In terms of, just in the last 2 years that I've been here, let alone what I remember Ulaanbaatar being like in 2005, let alone 2003, my first trip, I think we can all see as well as experience the growth that's taking place. Basically being driven by the mining industry and then all the supply, the logistics, they go hand in hand in terms of facilitating their needs at the mining sites. So I think as whether be it hotels, be it restaurants, be it shops, same thing for the airlines. There are generally more and more people traveling, driven by the mining companies, driven by also what I see in the tourism side as well too. Because Mongolia has such a unique tourist destination to offer to anyone in Asia. Whereas, at some point after you've been to Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Beijing, these cities all tend to offer the sort of same things. Excellent restaurants, shopping, nice hotels, things like that, but it's always in a metropolitan environment. Mongolia offers something unique in terms of the countryside, just the vast open spaces, which most cities in the world don't have. So my analogy is just like what the Rocky Mountains are in North America, be it Banff in Canada or the Colorado Rockies where people go with skiing, people go for the hiking, people go for the fresh air, the outdoor aspect. That's what Mongolia has to offer, and as more and more people, especially in the surrounding countries of Korea, Japan, and China start coming, I think there's a big opportunity with tourism. And likewise, I think there will be more Europeans, North Americans, and Australians coming as well too.
So in that sense, let's talk about will the ИЗИНИS will be flying abroad from here?
So currently we do have 2 international destinations. We fly to Hailar in Inner Mongolia in China, and we also fly to Ullan-Ude in Buryatia in Russia.
How many times a week to Ullan-Ude?
So currently both those destinations are 2 times a week, but with the coming of the winter schedule effective October 31, we'll be increasing the frequencies to 3 times a week, both to Hailar and to Ullan-Ude.
Why the winter you increase?
So twofold. In the summer, we have 4 aircraft right now. We have 4 Saab 340 aircraft, 34 seats. In the summer, the planes are fully allocated because of the sheer number of tourism, the sheer volumes of tourists coming. The planes are allocated to facilitate the needs of the tour operators and the tourists that are coming to the country. Now, as the numbers of tourists are going down, we have more free available aircraft space.
That means you have more passenger in winter on those directions, on the roads?
No, so we have more aircraft time to allocate, and we also think there'll be more passengers on those flights because, again, of the winter, be it the short days, the bad weather, the cold, the wind, driving is a less preferred option in the winter than it is in the summer. So because we have the planes to allocate to those routes, and because we believe there will be an uptick in terms of local traffic, we believe there's enough demand out there to...
Maybe more business activities grow up?
That could definitely be as well as too. We really think that both these flights, with Hailar, what we're doing is we have 2 flights via Tribal-Sum. This 3rd flight will be a non-stop, directly from Hailar to Ulaanbaatar.
Okay. Which passengers is more, through Choir or direct? Which will have more passengers?
It depends. It's kind of hard because no one's ever flown this route, so we don't really know for the first year.
To start this.
Yeah.
Speaking about the flights inside of the country, like Choir, right? How many IMAX you fly already?
So currently, I should know this. I believe we fly to 13 destinations right now, counting Ulaanbaatar 14.
Large-scale complaints about the price. It's too expensive, and one of the reasons of why Mongol National Airlines, MIAT, had abandoned the domestic flight was because they had the price limit, and eventually the domestic flight was not usable anymore, not profitable. So you are sort of replacing that missing part, right? And what is in terms of price? Is it do you free to charge whatever you like, or you have certain limit, or or other limiting factors?
So in today's environment, there are no limitations in terms of what fares we can charge. The fares that we do charge are indicative of the demand for those markets. So we have different fare types, even to the same market, let's say to Dalanzagad. You know, not everyone will pay the same fare. A business person who buys the ticket at the last moment and definitely needs to be there for their business activities with the mining sites will pay a much, much higher fare than somebody who buys the fare 10 days in advance.
I see.
So there's different fare types out there depending on each market segment, be it a local passenger, a business passenger, or a tour passenger.
What is the most busiest route in Mongolia in between Ulaanbaatar and any other IMAC?
So right now, because of everything that's going on, it really is Dalanzagad for twofold, because some of the larger mining projects are happening down in the Gobi. And even though ИЗИНИС Эйrвэйз does fly and facilitate the needs of the mining companies with charter flights that go directly to their mining site, there still is enough demand that they have from other suppliers, vendors, contractors, consultants that take our scheduled services down there at a year-round basis. Also, with tourism, again, between Murun and Dalanzagad, most of the foreigners that come here, most of the international visitors, usually either want to go to Lake Hoofskol up in Murun or down to the Gobi and see the desert.
So
or
this triangle is served by you?
No, we don't do the triangle flight. Unfortunately, the way the schedule's always been up to now, if you want to see, let's say, Murun.
Why you would not in summertime?
We will do that next year because, as I said, currently this year we have 4 Saab aircraft. The 4 planes were fully allocated. We just did not have the time to do that.
So you will increase the park next year?
We will acquire more aircraft for next year, and also we'll facilitate that. And the other thing, too, keep in mind, it's kind of hard for most people to understand this, that even though we'll start next year, we'll have triangle flights, where an individual can start an Ulama tour, fly to Murun, spend 2, 3, 4 days there, and then fly from Murun directly to Dalanzagad, and then back. Now, we're doing that for the first time. Right now, all the tour operators, the Mongolian tour operators who have partners in North America, in Australia, in Korea, in Western Europe, those partners are now putting and selling these packages now. And it's like these things have to be done 6, 7 months in advance in order to facilitate the needs of people coming here next summer. So that's why next year
it was always the case for the last 20 years, but it was also the case always the Mongolian Airlines was canceling the flight just before the tourists come. So is this problem solved in the country?
I didn't hear. They were consolidating the flights or canceling the flights?
No, either domestic flights were always cancelled, many times cancelled by Mongolian Airlines at their own time when they had a flight.
No, so ИЗИНИС Эйрвэйз has a schedule, and at times we do change the schedule. Now, schedule changes happen for 3 reasons. Weather, which we cannot control. Mechanical reasons, which again for passenger safety, if we do have mechanical, we will err on the side of caution, keep the plane on the ground to make sure that our maintenance and engineers can fix that plane. And then the third reason why there may be a schedule change, be it a cancellation or a time change, may be for commercial reasons. And when that happens, what we've done this year is because we'll have many cases where a mining company, a government, parliament member, someone will need a plane for a special purpose, a charter flight. Our planes are fully allocated, but we will facilitate that need because the customer, the client, pays a lot of money for that. At the same time, though, we recognize that if we have a plane going to Dalanzagad at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but now we're changing it such that the flight time is 6 p.m., that disservices the people, the passengers, and the scheduled aircraft. So our policy internal is that if we have any sort of schedule change or cancellation, anything like that, we do it 72 hours in advance to give enough notice to the scheduled passenger. And likewise, we do give compensation as well, too.
I say, how many do Mongolian passengers increase or keep going? The passenger load factor?
It keeps on increasing. So what we've seen this year is both for the local passenger sales and for passengers coming in from overseas markets, both are growing. So there's a lot more people traveling domestically within the country. And when I say local passengers, I mean Mongolians and foreigners who live here on a permanent basis. That market is growing significantly. And likewise, foreigners who are coming here, be it for business, be it for leisure, that segment is also increasing as well too.
In terms of competition, do you feel any competition?
There's always competition, and competition is good because competition increases creativity and provides more options to the passenger, and likewise it forces you as an airline, as a company, to offer better service, a better product, and to innovate. So yes, there is competition domestically, as we had said before.
Will it be reflected in your price? Will
yes.
it be a price competition or not?
Well, to answer that question, yes and no. So the best example I can give you is to Choibalsam. You know, we were flying that 4 times a week. Air Mongolia was also flying that 2 times a week. The fare that Air Mongolia offered was cheaper than ИЗИНИS Эйрвэйз, significantly cheaper. And Choibalsam is not a tourist market. We don't sell tickets. It's really a local market. So our fare, because of where we're at in terms of, you know, we are a private carrier. NUCOM is the parent company of ИЗИNИS Эйрвэйз. And part of the mandate from NUCOM is that, you know, we will offer an airline. We will offer airline services to passengers, to customers, but we also need to do it on a profitable basis. We are not a Mongolian government-owned carrier. We can't provide this as a social service. So our airfares are what they are, reflected in terms of what the demand is in the market, but also what we need to do in order to cover costs.
Yes.
So to answer your question again directly, to Choibalsam is the best example I can offer you, in that Air Mongolia did have a significantly lower fare than we did, but yet we are still currently flying that market, and Air Mongolia isn't. And part of it, I think, had to do with passengers seeing the value. You know, it's not necessarily just about the lowest fare, because we had more frequencies, because our schedule is a lot more committed in terms of keeping, you know, 4 days a week. We're operating Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. In terms of if there were any schedule changes made, we do provide customer service in terms of contacting the passenger and informing them that your flight that was scheduled at 2 o'clock is now at 4 o'clock.
Yes.
If we ever did a cancellation of thing, we do offer compensation, even though the passenger can change. So it's not just the price that you're paying. People also, and when I say people, it means the Mongolian passenger.
Do you feel competition with Miat?
No, we don't feel competition with him, because Miat is flying internationally. We're flying domestically.
No, they were flying once in between Hovd and Ulaanbaatar.
Oh, yes,
somehow.
You're absolutely right. That was done
happen?
last year. Yes, Miat was flying.
Why is that? They announced it very bigly that they will fly now, and they had big TV show on that, and then suddenly they have abandoned.
So that was flown last summer. It was a tag flight. They flew the 737, first stopping in Murun and continuing on to Hovd, and then back to Murun and back to Ulaanbaatar. So that was done last July and August of 2009, twice a week. Part of the reason why it stopped, I'm sure commercially it probably made sense, and if it was proper for them or not, but I know for passengers loved it because the fare was so low. However, what happened was, after about 20 landings in Murun, the runway cracked. The runway in Murun was not thick enough to handle a 737 landing so many times.
But yet this Civil Aviation Authority was announcing proudly that this airport can handle anything.
So to that point, I think within the Mongolian Civil Aviation Authority, the Ministry of Transport and the Airport Authority, there's always different factions in terms of who are doing things for commercial reasons.
So Murun cannot handle Boeing 737?
The way last year it couldn't, and even
how about Hovd?
Yes, Hovd can handle a 737.
What else airport in the country?
Choibalsam can as well.
Choibalsam can
and
do.
I believe Dalanzagad, but I'm not sure.
Okay. There was a flight, or there is a flight between Bayung Ulgi Aymak and one city in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Yeah, to Usk-Kamennogorsk.
Yes.
SCAT Airlines.
Yes.
SCAT Airlines does that, I believe, once a week.
Are you going to fly this direction?
So ИЗИНИS Эйрвэйз does have the designation. We can only fly routes that the government has granted us designation.
Okay.
So we do have the designation, and yes, we are looking at potentially flying a plane between Ulgi to Usk-Kamennogorsk.
Why Usk-Kamennogorsk? Not the other flight behind another bigger cities?
We don't have the to Almaty or Astana,
okay.
Is that what you're referring to? We currently don't have the designations, but also we don't have the right aircraft type to do that.
Oh, I see.
You also need
What is the reason that Miat does not fly on that? Ulaanbaatar, Almaty, Istanbul, they once used to fly.
Jargal, second here, I can't answer that question for you. I wish I could, because From our perspective, the more international routes that ИЗИНИS, that MIAT flies, the better. And please understand, even though I'm here as a representative of ИЗИНИS Airways, as Vice President of Sales and Marketing, I'm not speaking necessarily what's best for ИЗИNИS. I mean, for Mongolia, if you look at it as a whole, in terms of what's best for the country, its people, its economy, the more international flights that MIAT flies, it's better for everyone. So, as Vice President of Sales and Marketing of ИЗИNIS Airways, yes, I would love for MIAT to fly to Almaty, Astana, Hong Kong, because that would provide more fee traffic for our domestic routes. However, as a citizen of Mongolia, as a resident of Mongolia, someone who lives here, if MIAT were to do that, Astana, Almaty, Shanghai, Taipei, Hong Kong, I mean, if you think about what that would do, it would bring a lot more people in and out of the country. It'd be a lot easier. For instance, I was just in Hong Kong last week for a mining conference. I took Korean via Incheon down to Hong Kong. Between the transit and the 2 flights, everything, those are about 12 hours. Two separate 12-hour days that are gone. Whereas if there was a direct flight,
and yet it is the most convenient flight too.
Well, it wasn't necessarily the most convenient. It was also the one that I could get a seat on at the last moment. But if you had a nonstop flight, what would be a half day that's lost is now only 5 or 6 hours. And what that would do, it would stimulate so much traffic here. Not only would it be good for MIAT, not only would it be good for ИЗИNИS in terms of as businesses, but if you think about what it would do for the country in terms of more people staying at hotels, more people staying at GERS in the summer, people eating at the restaurants, going to shops. It would stimulate the economy in so many different ways.
And one of the biggest problems in the country in the development, in particular in this terms of tourism development, is airline connection. First of all, Mongolian Airlines, which is keep losing traffic to Korean Air, and now the other airlines possibly will fly. If MIAT doesn't fly, then others will fly. Good example is, I think, Japanese Airlines, right? Is been flying to Mongolia?
So right now we have one Korean airline flying here, Korean Airlines. We also have one Chinese in terms of Air China. From Japan, currently no airlines fly right here. Jargal has the designation. They flew a couple of charter flights in the summer 2008. They didn't fly anything in 2009, and now this year they didn't fly anything either because of all the restructuring that they're going on internally.
Okay.
But I know Asiana has an interest in flying here. I know that other Chinese carriers have, as well as All Nippon from Japan. There definitely is an interest in those carriers in terms of.
And yet there is just so much opportunity in Mongolia, and also it's a connecting destination for an overflying destination for. It's one of the international major air route, right? Ulaanbaatar is. When such a big traffic on the air through through Ulaanbaatar, and there is no on the ground. I mean, nobody is landing. That's something that I think we still could do a lot. I think a lot of innovations to come. What do you think?
Yeah, and again, that's something in the long term that the government will need to make a decision. Because Mongolia, here, even though I was born and raised in America, with a name like mine, Spiro, I'm Greek. I'm 100% Greek. I was born and raised in the States, but when I started school, I couldn't speak English because we just spoke Greek. So where I'm going with this, Mongolia is no different than Greece, than India, than Italy, in the sense that anytime you have a national flag carrier, the interests are usually of the government aviation policies are aligned with what's best for the national flag carrier, which are not necessarily what's best for the country. So the reason why I said about being Greek, it was the same thing in Greece with Olympic Airways. It was the national flag carrier. Everything was done to protect it from competition. Now, Greece's #1 industry is tourism by far. It has no mining. Tourism is the #1, which is #2 here in Mongolia. There was such a demand in terms of other carriers flying in that eventually that the government had to cede to allow other carriers to fly, and Olympic could not be competitive. But again, you look at India with Air India. Again, that's another national flag carrier. Italy with Alitalia was finally privatized just this past year. It's something that every country, every ethnic group, every nationality feels proud of. Everybody wants to say, we're Greek, we have our own national flag carrier. We're Mongolian.
Yeah, how about then just to have this flag carrier to be a public company instead of state-owned company?
Well, in the rest of the world, that's the way it's going, towards privatization.
Many good cases. Initially, they sell a certain part. Then after the values become increased, then sell another certain part with more bigger price.
And again, that's happened everywhere in the world, be it with the European carriers, Air France,
yes.
KLM, Lufthansa, BA. The U.S. carriers were always privately owned companies.
Olympic Air is existing now?
Yes, it does, but it's been bought out by a private company.
See? And that's why it is existing and doing much better, probably.
It's still struggling, but it is surviving. It has to survive on its own. But in the way it's doing much better, its product has to improve too.
Is it
so it's better for
100%?
the customers.
Is it sold 100% to private company?
Yeah, it was actually bought out by another airline, another Greek airline called Aegean,
yeah,
which
private airline.
You probably never heard of. Yes, it's a private airline, which actually became a member of Star Alliance.
Okay. Do they use the same name of Olympic Air?
They're holding on to the name Olympic.
That's good.
Just for certain
and
routes.
Flag is to be there too.
Yeah, well,
Does it come with the flag?
Again, Aegean has its own purposes. Aegean was started as a private carrier. It's now become the 28th member of Star Alliance.
Okay.
It actually is much larger than Olympic, but it's still holding onto some aspects of Olympic for the branding, for the name recognition.
Yeah, for branding. How about Air India?
So Air India, that's another story. The losses of that on a per year basis are in the billions of U.S.
State-owned
dollars.
company. Former.
Yes. Still is state-owned company, still is the national flag carrier, but now you have carriers such as Kingfisher and Jet.
There is no successful case of state-owned air carrier competing successfully with international airlines. Almost.
Almost. The closest one, and it's kind of hard to define, is it state-owned, is it not? But here, other than Singapore Airlines, but other than that, there's nothing that comes close. But Singapore is a very good example. In terms of Singapore Airlines, it's one of the world's best airlines.
Yes, many
in
years.
terms of quality, service, the product it provides. Singapore, population, I believe, of about 4 or 5 million people. You know, it doesn't have a large population base.
Yeah, it's almost like us, yes.
But it flies all over the world. Now, Singapore Airlines has had to compete all these years. And even though I believe it still is, some of it is government-owned, all the decisions made in Singapore Airlines are commercial decisions.
That's what we need behind everything.
Well, that's true for all
commercial
industries.
decisions, not political decisions.
That's true. But let me take it one step further with the example of Singapore. I mean, to your point about commercial decisions versus political, I mean, that's not just true for airlines. That's true for all industries. But the Singapore government has taken it one step further. What they've recognized is that the best thing for Singapore is not necessarily protecting Singapore Airlines, but bringing more passengers, more tourists, more business people to Singapore. So the government of Singapore, even though they still are a part owner through Temasek, the national fund of Singapore, they have invested, a lot of money in building a low-cost terminal at the airport. They built this low-cost terminal. It won't help Singapore Airlines because Singapore Airlines is a very full-scale, upscale product. But the government of Singapore has realized that, we have this new casino. We've opened up so many new office buildings, so many new shops, hotels.
They serve different market.
Yes, so they've opened up to Air Asia, to
between cities, the Air Asia. Yeah.
Jetstar.
Yep.
They want to facilitate more and more the low-cost carriers bringing people to Singapore.
Does it mean that the national airlines, in particular government-owned national airlines, could be a successful model if it is more integrated into other more market and flying together with other airlines?
Yes, but let's take it a little bit more broader. That's not just true for airlines. That's true in any industry. Anytime you have a national flag entity, be it in telecoms, whatever it may be, it's always much better run by the private sector. And I don't say that.
You know what's the reason behind?
What the reason is behind?
Yeah,
what?
Why the state-owned companies are always less effective than the private ones?
And typical, it usually comes down to a private-owned enterprise because demands performance.
Private-owned ones are, if they will lose everything. State-owned, if they lose only job, not the business, because they don't care. Anyway, this is such an endless, big topic, and it's so important for Mongolia. And I'm so glad that we were able to touch some part of it. And I think the researchers, people will go deeper. And we are glad that people with your expertise like you, living and working in Mongolia for 1 hour private airlines, and happy to see IZINIS keep growing, serving the market which is not served otherwise. So good job and congratulations with your business, and thank you very much for coming.
Well, thank you for this opportunity, and look forward to being here for a long time to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Таны төлөө эх орн чинь юу хийж чадах вэ гэж асуухаас өмнө та өөрөө эх орныхон төлөө юу хийж чадах вэ гэж асуу. Young Federal